Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the sixth episode of Leaders Connect. We welcome you all here today. Uh, Leaders Connect is an initiative started by ARCA Leadership in collaboration with TOSB Conversations. A bit about ARCA Leadership. ARCA Leadership is a movement to develop and inspire people to live with authenticity, an ecosystem of senior HR leaders and professional coaches who have come together after having experienced the benefits of living with authenticity. The movement has been started by AshuKhanna, a chartered accountant to now leading a movement for authenticity. Her journey of transformation of 15 plus years has been filled with discovery of new expressions like entrepreneur, leadership coach, author, and speaker. For an organization so young, we are fortunate to have the partnership of TOSB and other premier organizations as our outreach partners. About TOSB, TOSB is an online platform with leading experts offering cutting edge perspectives and learning from their fields. The platform partners with global speakers and experts to facilitate conversations on the most pressing concerns and possibilities of the current world on topics ranging from storytelling to boardroom philosophies, digital transformation, diversity, and more. So, what exactly is Leaders Connect? Leaders Connect is a series of online dialogues with some of the most inspiring leaders from different walks of life, including sports, technology, media, healthcare, marketing, and more. The genesis of this occurred because when I noticed that there is goodness in everyone, and somewhere have we lost sight of that gift, I was truly inspired to share these stories with the world and empower the world to harness and unleash their own goodness through these stories. We have dialogues with some of the most inspiring leaders and deep dive into an all important quality of successful, transformational, and authentic leadership. The series aims to dialogue around qualities such as authenticity, emotional intelligence, inclusion, trust, courage, compassion, and more. We also aim to make this a collaborative and exciting platform for global leaders to connect and share ideas. Our outreach partners, Beyond Diversity, is a global think tank focusing on diversity and inclusion. They collaborate with institutions and leaders to create inclusive workplaces via consulting, mentoring, and creating awareness. Through long term cultural change and sustainable programs, they impact leaders, communities, and businesses to be inclusive in growth. Since 2011, they have supported more than 100 organizations across the region and impacted more than a lakh leaders to promote inclusive leadership. Additionally, we've also been supported by the Center for Transformational Coaching, founded by Leon Vanderpool, and we're really delighted to have him share our message with his global community. To have this conversation today, we have with us two very senior leaders, business HR leaders, veterans in their own field. P Dwarkanath, former chairman GSK Limited, and Rajeev Dubey, principal advisor Mahindra. P Dwarkanath brings a rich and varied experience of nearly 5 decades in the arena of leadership development, human capital, and corporate governance. Till recently, he was the chairman of GSK Consumer Healthcare and director of human resources associated with GSK for over 4 decades. He's held continues to hold various board and advisory positions. He's been associated with as the group human capital head for Max Group, the president of National HRD and Network, president of Delhi Management Association, regional president of North Region of All India Management Association. He has won several prestigious awards for his valuable contribution to HR and leadership development. Thank you, Dwarka, for being here. We welcome you.
Thank you.
Rajiv
Thank you,
Dubey,
Ash.
Rajeev Dubey was the Group President, HR and Corporate Services and CEO, Aftermarket Sector, member of Group Executive Board, Mahindra and Mahindra, when he retired recently in April 2020. He continues to serve as Principal Advisor for the Mahindra Group and Chairman of Mahindra Insurance Brokers, Mahindra Steel Service Centers, Mahindra First Choice Wheels, Mahindra First Choice Services and Fifth Gear Ventures, and Board of Mahindra Intragrade. He is also a member of the governing body of International Labour Organization Geneva, serves on the board of International Organization of Employers Geneva, where he is also the chairperson of the Future of Work Policy Group. So welcome, Rajeev. And with this PARPAC group today, two speakers today, I am really humbled to have them and delighted to have them here. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I will now actually deep dive straight into, with my typical style of shooting the arrow straight and not missing, with a question that starts with, how would you define authenticity, and is it possible to be authentic in the corporate world?
So I guess Dwarka should go first.
Well, fine, Rajiv. Thank you for giving me, because it's always good to you come later because you can cover all the points. First, at the outset, Ashu, thank you very much for having us here, having me. I'm really honored and privileged to be here. And thank you for the ARCA also for hosting this. And good morning to viewers. Let me start with a disclaimer, Ashu, if you don't mind. I do not pretend to be a scholar or an authentic leader or a philosopher or a sociologist or a psychologist. I do not have such credentials like my friend Rajiv has. Let me start with this. What I learned in my life is basically what my parents have taught us as a family, behaviors or values, coupled with the corporate experience of nearly 5 decades, which you shared. I can only talk as a practicing manager, having spent in the corporate and with my family as well. So to start with is a great question. I wish I have the right answer, which I'm afraid I don't have. But having said that, let me start with saying in a humble way, not false or copied. What is authentic? It's a genuine and real. Authenticity, according to me, is about presence, living in the moment with conviction and courage, and staying true to yourself. You know, you are honest with yourself and with others. You take responsibility for your mistakes, and you do not worry what the party lines are, what your manager wants, what the organization wants, but is something very true to yourself, what inner feeling says, and what you want to practice it. This is the it needs to align with your inner beliefs, and as a result you come as a genuine person, true authentic person with a credibility and integrity. This is how broadly according to me, authenticity means.
Thank you for that. I will wait for Rajiv to top that up.
Okay. All right. So for me, authenticity means you can rely upon the person to live up to the promise that he or she makes. To me, ultimately, that is what authenticity is. But if one wants to sort of peel the onion, then ideally, thinking, saying, and doing are aligned. Now, what is thinking and what do you say out of the millions of things that you think? All those things, I'm not getting into its complex field, so I'm keeping it simple, that you can be relied upon to do what you say, but the context is important. There has to be an overall purpose, there has to be a primary task, and within that context, you can be relied upon to do what you say you will do, living up to the promise. To me, that is authenticity. Now, what does it require? Then we can keep going on and on. But ultimately, it's about being relied in a context.
So trust becomes a very significant part of it ultimately. Now, I hear you both, but when I come to the next part is you can be relied upon to do what you commit to doing and being really true with yourself. How do you think in a corporate world where people are constantly struggling with trying to keep the boss happy and trying to be happy themselves, how can they manage this conflicted space?
You want me to?
Yeah, Dwarka Garu, always you first.
No, sir. If for a change, you go first.
So Ashu, I think this dilemma is not there only in the corporate world. It's equally there in families. It's there everywhere. So yes, it's a struggle because oftentimes there is a conflict between what you are thinking at a very deep level and what is practical for you to say in the context of achieving the purpose or the primary task. That's why I put huge emphasis on the context in which authenticity is to be viewed. And therefore, it's a question, again, of balancing it out, of what do you choose to say, when and where and how. Now, you need not speak the untruth, but it doesn't mean that you have to speak everything that you think, because there is a context. Because by saying, so I mean, let me give you a very crude example. You walk into the room of, say, union people with whom you're going to have a tense discussion, and the first thing that you notice is that the union leader's hair is not combed. That's what you notice first. So do you, being authentic, आपको बाल झाड़ना भी नहीं आता है. So that's a very crude example of saying that you have to choose which of the many thoughts that you are having you want to express and why. So it's the why, the what, the how, the whom, the when, all those things come in, and you have to keep balancing it out all the time. And that's the dilemma that you face in corporate life, in family life, in NGO life, in political life, everywhere. You can't get away from the dilemma.
Very well said. So it requires constant mindfulness and reflection before just. And you brought about a very pertinent thing. Often people confuse authenticity with just saying what I'm thinking. You hear this whole, what I call the difference between being intellectually authentic and emotionally authentic, where they believe that if they are just saying whatever they think needs to be said, they say that's what they see as authenticity, versus, as you very rightly put it, as the true to the context and purpose of the situation.
If I can just add, Ashu, I think what Rajiv Garu has said is absolutely right. I mean, I think you experience this, be it in the corporate world, in your family, or in your personal, as Rajiv Garu has said it very well. But the fact remains, in case of corporate world, it's much more challenging, because something which is not totally in your hands. And secondly, sometimes, there is always a conflict between the purpose versus profit. I think, that is what is the purpose of this organization versus the profit. This is where some of the dilemmas come in. It's apart from small things, what you do. And secondly, when you talk about purpose versus profit, I don't think everything is to refer to an audacious goals or a big goals of a corporate world. As he said very rightly, small things which you get carried away and create an impressions, and to dispel those sort of impressions also becomes difficult. Sometimes you also get into a feeling, because of your positional power, because of your age and authority hierarchy, you think you know everything, and in the process you tend to ignore other views, and you feel that you don't give a space to them, and you think what you are saying is right. This is where sometimes conflict comes within the corporate world, because your manager feels differently, or your organization per se feels differently, but you have a very strong views. To sum it up is not that easy, be it in the private, in the personal life, or in a corporate world. Much more difficult in the corporate life, where the challenge between profit versus purpose. This is where you need to bring the genuineness, how true you are to your purpose, and what your inner feeling says should also reflect in terms of giving space to others so that you can accept their views and feedbacks to ensure if there is a you need to do any correction in your path, you can be able to do it. So it is not only self-awareness, but self-realization based on the views and feedbacks, which you should be open and honest and transparent.
Rajiv, would you like to add something here?
No. I think this covers the field well. And we'll wait for the next question.
So, so you talked about profit versus purpose, which is really something which I think the whole of last year has been one of the biggest years of putting that whole context. Organizations are tend to be more profit driven. And last year was all about purpose, livelihood, and lives, this whole struggle and conversations. What do you think? How did organizations navigate through this?
It's a great question. I think last year was a great eye opener. For me, the culture of the litmus test to test the authenticity of leaders, to test the culture of authenticity of an organization, came out very clearly how how the organizations have treated their people during lockdown and during the pandemic, and how did they manage between the lives and livelihood of the people. This is where I'm afraid that some of the organizations have faltered. You see, ultimately they proved they are not authentic, maybe to the extent they believe it so. Talk the talk, but not walk the talk. To give a few examples, everybody says, you ask any CEO, any chairman of a company, or any leader, people are the key asset, they are valuable asset. But when it came to this sort of turbulent times, the way the people have been treated, it is not that everybody can be afford to treat their employees in a particular way, but within the limits they have. I'm afraid most of the people have not demonstrated the authenticity by way of furloughs or by way of terminations or otherwise, without caring for people, be it a migrant labor or anyone. So it's a great eye-opener. I think this is where people have now started realizing you may lose a P&L for a 1 year, but if you want to have a strong balance sheet in terms of authenticity, which can help you in the long run, you need to have the focus is on more on the in terms of purpose, which you need to align people with the purpose of the organization. So for me, authenticity has become paramount. It's a business strategy during this, and it's been revealed, which tested the culture of the organization as well as the leadership.
Rajiv, what are some of the challenges or navigational tools that you have seen, if you could add to that?
Yeah, so I just want to add one thing as a starting point, that purpose actually defines the problem that we are seeking to solve in a unique way for some stakeholder. And profit is something that is a byproduct, a necessary byproduct of the process of actually solving the problem. So if you look at any business or ask somebody who founds a business, yes, everybody definitely wants a return on the capital employed. But the purpose of the organization is to solve some problem in a unique way for some stakeholder. And profit is something that you have to generate in the process of achieving that purpose, right? So I think the two have to go together. I mean, I don't think that the two are in conflict even logically, right? The conflict, of course, comes when you have to take some decisions on the spur of the moment. It has to do with time spans and who do you give primacy to. And of course, it's a huge subject. There's a lot of literature now that is coming on that is questioning the primacy of the shareholder versus other stakeholders. I won't get into all that, but to me, a common sense view is that purpose is something that defines the reason for our existence, the problem that we are going to solve for somebody. And profit is something you have to generate to keep the organization going, right? So the two have to go together. Now, what are some of the means that you resolve what are the means by which you resolve the conflict? right? So the conflict will always be there, and it's a question always of balancing it out, of degrees. So the tools that are available to you are primarily, I would say, in the incentive system that you create. What kind of behavior is the organization rewarding? It's in the kind of conversations that take place. It's in the reward and recognition. I mean, basically the HR lever. So you create behavior, and the sum total of which is culture, and you create that culture through the way in which you operate your HR levers. Now, this is a really motherhood and apple pie kind of a statement, right? But that's the truth. That you create behavior through the way you operate your HR levers. And then we can keep dissecting which are the HR levers. And I think ultimately the most important HR lever in this context for shaping behavior is really the reward and recognition system and the performance management system. They sit at the center, but everything else is connected. It's an interconnected world, right? But ultimately, it's walking the talk. It's how the leaders behave. It's what is the example that they set. Ultimately, it's that, but that's not good enough. It has to be supported by this whole ecosystem of HR leaders. So that's
okay. Ashu, if I can just chip in, I don't want to limit to only what happened after pandemic. I just want to address the generic question, the purpose versus profit. Since you asked me, I'm tempted to quote my own example of GSK. One of the things, when you talk about the purpose, I totally agree with what Rajeev has said. But, you know, the GSK mission, I think, you know, it's our global quest is to improve the quality of life by enabling people to do more, feel better, live longer. It may say cliche, many companies have what is so great about it, but the emphasis is on our global quest is to improve the quality of human life. You know what they've done after a merger when the new culture, the purpose has been why we are in this business. They said we will not indulge in any business where it relates to a product or brands which cannot scientifically prove that it can add value to the quality of human life. Scientifically, if it can't be proved, we will not. So basically, in the process, they have hived off, sold off some very profit oriented, brands, Yardley talcum powder or Bill cream, whatever it is, regardless of the losses they may incur during the initial years. But they said that is the purpose of the company, which ultimately will help the organization to grow better. So this is where, you know, it's a challenge. But I think if you drive that purpose very clearly, that is where the authenticity has to come into play. So they have demonstrated it's not a cliche or a statement made for the sake of doing it, but it means they try to follow the execution of what they have said. Sometimes you may have a great statements, but you may not be able to execute it. This is where they demonstrated short-term losses versus long-term gains.
So it's a
Ashu,
yeah. Go ahead, Rajeev.
yeah, so I want to just chip in a little bit because I think what the pandemic has brought out very, very strongly is the business case for trust and authenticity. And let me quickly explain how. When there are conditions of fear and uncertainty, right? Extreme fear and uncertainty. What is required are two basic things. One is a deep understanding of stakeholder needs, what their fears and problems are. And the second one is something called distributed leadership. You need to empower people to be able to take decisions at very quick, short notice, sometimes proactively, all through the value chain, which means a huge amount of empowerment is required and a huge amount of empathy is required to be able to understand what stakeholders need. Now, for empowerment and for empathy, trust and authenticity are key. Therefore, what the pandemic has done, in my opinion, because it has highlighted what is required for good decision making and outperformance under conditions of severe fear and uncertainty, brings out the primary role of trust, of authenticity and empathy and purpose. Okay, so let me stop there. And maybe there are 400 questions that will come out of what I've just said. But pandemic has brought out a strong business case for trust and authenticity.
No, absolutely. I fully agree with you that COVID has literally played a mirror to all that was lying brushed under the carpet and pushed it up in front of our faces big time. Uh, Rajiv, you have in Mahindra's had, the RISE program. I've heard a lot about that for developing leaders. I, would love to hear some more about it and how have you been successful? Because it's one thing to talk about, you need to do empowerment, empathy, but when you have conglomerates of that size, how do you really build a culture, which is what is most critical for this walk the talk happening?
Okay, so RISE actually is a definition of who we are, right? RISE defines who Mahindra is, and that one sentence, which I'll have to unfortunately talk about, is the mother font for business strategy, for all human capital development initiatives, and obviously, therefore, for the creation of the culture that goes side by side with the strategy, structure, processes, and metrics to create sustained outperformance, right? So that's what RISE is. And leadership development is something that flows out of it, because we need people to behave in a certain way. Because what is culture? Culture is nothing but the way people behave in the organization, especially as they go around taking business decisions, right? So now that one sentence, basically RISE says that we will drive positive change in the lives of our stakeholders and communities across the world to enable them to rise. And then we will do that by challenging conventional thinking and innovatively using our resources. So you take this one sentence, and from there you get what we call the 3 RISE pillars and the 5 leadership behaviors. And this 3+5 framework is fed into all the HR leaders, right? Okay, so what are the 3 pillars? There are 3 views of the world. Number 1, accept no limits. Number 2, do alternative thinking. Number 3, above all, ensure that you're driving positive change, both within and outside the organization. What are the 5 behaviors which will bring these pillars to life, given the sort of work that we've already done on aligning the HR levers over the last 10 years to the 3 pillars, these 5 behaviors that we want people to live by, and that is a very important input when we are taking succession planning decisions. Number 1, ability to use the whole mind, where in any situation you combine logic, intellect, and rationality with empathy, connection, etc. Second one is to be a multiplier of energy, passion, ownership. And the third one is knowing how to manage fear and leverage failure. This is in the context of innovation. The fourth one is about mindfulness in the sense of being open to all possibilities that exist in a moment by not being a prisoner of your past. And finally, last but not least, trust through authenticity, right? So this is the 3+5 framework that feeds into all the HR levers, and it is hugely mirroring the business strategy, that each business has a separate business strategy, but they are guided by the core purpose of driving positive change by challenging conventional thinking and innovatively using resources, right? So in a very textbook kind of a way, I have told you what we do. And ultimately, the most important thing is, are leaders at all levels walking the talk? Are they living the 3+5? And are we rewarding those people, creating role models out of those that live the 3+5? Or do we say one thing and we actually reward all the guys who are doing the opposite of the 3+5? Now, how successful have we been? Very difficult for me to say. I can only say it is something that causes a lot of passion, creates a lot of passion, empowerment. People feel proud to talk about it. Harvard Business School is writing a case study on it. I don't know. These are just, I guess, some of looking at have we been successful. It's a lifelong journey. It's not a 100-meter dash. It's not even a marathon. I think it's a lifelong journey. We'll never really get there. I hope we never get there, because the day we say we fought here, that's the beginning of death. But it's something that I think gives a huge amount of passion in the organization and a sense of ownership, and people feel proud about it. I don't know whether that makes any sense for that statement.
It makes a lot of sense to say that obviously part of being authentic is recognizing that it is a process and not an end goal. And it's an ongoing process. And once you have your meters in place as to what is it that we are constantly aspiring to be and do, I think it comes, it's a culture that then obviously permeates through the others. Outliers always exist, but then what's the fun without them? Because then it's time to grow to the next level if you don't see those outliers also.
Yeah,
and there's something
that's true.
seriously wrong if you don't make mistakes, right?
You can never strive perfection. You can only strive excellence. I think perfection is always raising the bar.
Yeah, no, very well said, Dwarka. I have two questions. I'll bring them in now. Is a good point to bring them in. Pramod Gothi has asked, do you think that to be authentic, one should be ready to be vulnerable?
In a way, personally, I feel yes, you must prepare. It's not easy to be authentic. When you're trying to be authentic, many people may label you as a sort of negative guy, or you are a disruptor, or you don't align with the managers or your boss's instructions or the guidelines of the organization. It is not something very easy, both in personal and corporate life. It requires a lot of conviction and courage, and prepare to accept your mistakes. Everything, whatever do in the process may not be the right, as Rajeev said, but once only when you go through this, ultimately, I think, you will come out with the flying colors. I mean, that is what it is. Unless you go through this journey, the journey of navigating through different paths and difficult paths, you will not be able to achieve. In my view, it is not daunting, but it is difficult, but worth exploring this. That's what the tests have said. Just to build on this, Ashu, if I can say, one of the things GSK said is everyone committed, everyone contributing. I mean, this is very important here. When you said everybody in commenting, everyone is committed and contributing, means we do not believe in the hierarchy. Anybody in the organization, be from a Mali to Malik, can contribute. That is the opportunities we need to give. It is not just open for people who are in higher levels of hierarchy, but it's applicable to others. Then the question next is develop self and others. It is not, if you want to be true, authentic leader, you not only develop yourself, but you need to develop others. This is where the challenge comes sometimes. Everybody focuses on themselves, not others. But, if you want to really do this, then it's something is challenging. But, if you embrace that path, admit your mistake, respect others' views, and if you have been honest and credible, you can always achieve, I think, what you want to do. But it's not something which I would say daunting, but difficult.
Okay, let me come in, and the answer is: do you have to be willing to be vulnerable? Absolutely, absolutely. It's at the core. In fact, one of the 5 behaviors is multiplier, and a multiplier is a person that can multiply passion, engagement, and ownership by not being obsessed by the need to show I am the best, I have all the answers. In fact, our belief is that people who pretend to have all the answers are dangerous people. Good leaders, multipliers, focus on asking the right questions and co-creating the answers. Far from wanting to show I am the best, I have all the answers, such people have no issues in saying, I don't know, but let's try. Maybe there's somebody in the group that knows more than me. And they get joy in seeing 1,000 flowers bloom. So absolutely, I think vulnerability or being open to vulnerability is a key element of authenticity.
Thank you. That emphatically really puts it in place, because often vulnerability is confused with as a weakness versus a strength. And once again, last year, people had no answers, and going forward, it's been the most biggest year of imperfection that we've had to live with, of taking decisions in that space of imperfect information. I have a question from Shreya. Like they say, your truth and my truth are different. Does the same hold true for authenticity? Is it subjective?
Okay, who should go for? I think it'll help if you say Dwarka or Rajiv. Otherwise, we'll both keep
Rajiv,
quiet.
you go. You please go ahead.
Yes, of course, different people have different truths, and that's where the complexity and the challenges come. How do you take two different truths and then find commonality or find the way of moving towards a common goal? So, common truth may not be there, but if there is a common goal, then we can always find ways of how we move together with our differences.
Dwarka, you can add in.
You see, I think what he said is absolutely fine. Let me be a little bit provocative here. I mean, if I can, Ashu, just to build on this question, sometimes who is an authentic leader? A mafia leader can be an authentic leader? I think that is the question you need to ask. Let us not mix it up. If you do a liquor business, you are not in the authentic business. If you do only a healthcare business, you are in authenticity. Authenticity, you need to understand from the context in which you are talking about. I think, that's what Rajiv is saying. I strongly believe this is where we develop this misconception. You are a true model leader. You could be Gandhiji, you can be Nelson Mandela. I'm not saying. There are many people who do many other things, but in terms of their authenticity and the culture they developed and the leadership they demonstrated, still can be very authentic. I think, this is where I think we need to understand, as Rajiv said, it's a lifelong process. I don't think we got it perfectly right. It's just peeling the onion. The more you peel it, you get more, get into it, you understand more. That self-awareness, correction of your own thinking also can undergo a change.
I don't know if I fully agree about the mafia on here, because are you really being true to your inner self, or are you being true to your egoic self, operating from fear or operating from love? So I think there I would.
Okay, it's a provocative question. I take your point. I'm not holding a view, but I think these are the things which gives clarity of thought is to be required. That's what I'm saying. This is a clarity of thought required. These are the questions which will come. I mean, you said whether you are in authentic business, whether if you run a tobacco business or a liquor business, you are in authentic business. I think yes, isn't it?
Yeah, that is true. But each one has to go based on their own values of can they work in that business or not, or can they do it or not. But they're serving a segment of society. And if they believe that is so, then that is so. And it's really what I think it's coming down to is inclusion of perspectives. Everybody perceives and filters life differently. How inclusive can we be while staying true to ourselves?
Ashu, I just want to be a little bit more provocative. I'll just leave it as a question. There is no answer to it. Who am I? How many people know the answer to that?
We shall take that up at another time. That is a $1 million question that can have us having a webinar by itself.
For the rest of our life.
Yes. And as that observer, I shall pass the question right now. And say thank you for bringing it in here and provoking people to think, who is that authentic self? Which is a very, very relevant question, because the egoic self and the authentic self often gets confused. Very much two sides of the same coin, but which one are you looking at more of? So, moving from here, Rajiv and Dwarka, when you bring about whether it's the who am I or being authentic, our current the millennials are the most are the generation who can really carry the torch forward for all of us. You know, we are the ones who have to pass the baton forward and are the beacon of possibility. But they are the ones who need to really bring this. If they can live and amplify authenticity in the world as and be more purpose focused, where profit becomes a natural outcome rather than a lopsided desire. What can educational institutions really do when sometimes I feel that there is so much emphasis on imparting information? Is there enough focus on developing the self?
Yeah.
It's a very good question, Ashu. I think that is the need of the hour. I think the focus should be on the millennials and the younger generation because they are the people who are the future leaders, be it in corporate, be it in the country. I think one of the with my limited exposure to the management institutes and the education institutes, I think I'm not getting the sense the focus needs to be on this authenticity. But according to me, very few institutions have created that sort of a curriculum or imparting that sort of a training. Barring few institutions globally, I still really struggle. Only thing which they recently developed in last 5 6 years was more on corporate governance and business ethics, but still a long way to go on authenticity. But that is the need of the hour. I think one of the ways may slowly to bring in terms of the curriculum, where I think I would strongly urge ARCA as an initiative need to focus on these millennials and also try to help in co-creating an syllabus based on this authenticity and authentic leadership and authentic culture, which will help. I think when we are doing about the youngsters, the whole challenge is what is it for me today? When can I achieve it, rather than what is it for me and for the organization or for the business which I work, both in terms of short term and long term. That sense of purpose, sense of pride needs to be it needs to be demonstrated by way of telling these great stories, what some of them have been spoken to based on Mahindra's or GSK's or many other organizations. I think that would help it. So, but to answer is emphatic yes.
Thank you. Rajiv, some views from you, if we could have.
Yeah, so the answer is obvious that the current educational system was created in a certain context to create a certain kind of raw material, if you like, for the industrial society. And things have changed, and therefore I think we need to, and there is a fundamental re-evaluation going on of looking at three broad things: the why, the what, and the how, right? So why why do we need to talk about something? So what are the problems that we should talk about? And then information in the context of the problems that we need to be addressing. And finally, the how is the pedagogy, how you teach it, right? So I think that these three aspects, the why are we in school, what are the kinds of things we need to be talking about, which questions fundamentally the reason for human organization and behavior and what kind of work needs to be done. So the why, then the what is the information, and the how is the pedagogy. And all three have to be redefined and reassessed, in my opinion, to make the whole process of education, the mindset that has to be developed, the values, the beliefs, and it is something that has to be kept on. It's not only at the school level. You have to persist with it at the higher levels of education. You have to persist with it beyond education. Now, of course, all of us are going to be educating ourselves all our lives, skilling, unskilling, reskilling, values, beliefs. So, but definitely at the school level, that is the most important. There's a fundamental need to get away from all three aspects: what is in the curriculum, and the choice of what subjects, and then how you teach it. All three need to be addressed, and I think this why, what, and how needs to be kept going till the time people become as old as me and even beyond that.
So both of you are, resoundingly echoing the fact that it is much needed. Now, agility in organizations and educational institutions, we've seen under a crisis, digital transformation happened rapidly. However, authenticity is something that takes time. Is there any way one can, the way we went through a bitter pill last year, one can be a catalyst to making this movement happen more of, such that, to bring in that dynamism in it, which sometimes I think things get lost in processes versus action.
Yeah. So what is the question?
So really the question is, digital transformation, organizations were doing it at their own pace, but last year became a year of having to push the bar. Now, authenticity is something which is much needed, much recognized, but it is again a very trickle down impact that happens. Is there any way that one can push it a little more in the industry and the world or the society, and create momentum in it?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just say that maybe it's a quotation and a misquotation from Gandhi, but you have to be and live the change that you want to see. And I think that is something each one of us has to own up. Wherever we are. Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. So I think the problem is that we keep waiting for others to do things, and we think, what I do will not make any difference. But if each one of us realizes and takes upon us the responsibility to live this way wherever we are and try and spread it as much as we can in our everyday lives, I think that will make a huge difference. And I see it in myself. That, I've been saying that, there is a lockdown, I can't do very much. And I kill myself before I even start. But if I had to have the attitude that, okay, let me focus on what I can do given my circumstances and make as much of a difference as I can in this direction, which is about authenticity, which is about trust, which is about changing the mindset. So if each one of us should take upon ourselves the responsibility to live authentically and spread that message, spread that example wherever we are, I think that will make it like a million fireflies. Together we'll create a very bright world. But if each firefly thinks I don't make a difference, then we'll be in a dark world.
So you're really bringing back Gandhiji's, philosophy of be the change you wish to see. Start from home, take ownership. It will become a catalyst to many more.
Correct. That is in addition to having strategy, structure, process. I mean, it's not a substitute for. You have to have purpose, strategy, process, metrics, and systems. But that ain't enough. You have to then act. You have to live. The two together make it powerful.
Yeah, true.
Ashu, just to supplement what Rajiv Garu has said, I think the point you made was that digitalization, how does it help in trying to bridge the gap? There is always a challenge to start with. How do you balance like lives and livelihood, high tech and high touch? How do you bring that humanization? How do you bring that, persuasive and influencing skills when you become so mechanical? I never thought when, the lockdown started last year, just to give my example, I never thought that I will retire from the company through online. I never thought, I could never imagine that can happen. I mean, apart from inducting people, onboarding online, and it can never happen. We never thought that unless you have a personal counseling, you will not be able to speak to them, explain to them the rationale, what Rajiv has said, how and why. But now we started realizing, as he said rightly, it's a change in the mindset. I think if you think positively, half glass is full. Then if you think negatively, it can never happen. There is a lot of comments in saying in all these online virtual coachings and sessions and learning L&Ds, people were saying it may not be impactful, but now people have started doing impactful. The only thing is you need to balance it, think it positively. What is the ultimate benefit you get? The reach has increased. So I to me, digitalization should be used as one of the strong levers to promote this cause and to bring this authenticity much more clearly and manifested it well, rather than looking at a sort of a hindrance.
So make a friend of technology to push the pace of it and add momentum to it. I guess it has, so maybe I would put it then, COVID has possibly in its own, it's been a blessing in disguise that people have got more used to the virtual world and we can use technology in a more friendly manner rather than just as being perceived as losing touch and this, you know. So I see.
Yeah, friendly and unfriendly. Let's not forget that technology has its use. It's something that is going to permeate all our life. But like anything powerful, it can be used for good and it can be used for evil also. And we have to always, there's a lot of governance and ethics and so many things involved in the application of technology. Technology is going to be everywhere. It's going to be like oil, or it's the electricity of tomorrow, if you like, or the oil of tomorrow. But that leaves a lot of questions still to be answered. But clearly, we have to make sense with it. But it cannot become our master. We have to.
It's all pervasive. I think, one of the things which we realized, as you said, Ashu, is that when you're managing these sort of change in the mindset, you can't apply them with your old thinking. I think you need to change your thinking. I know that is the biggest challenge you have it. Well, it worked well for me during that time. It may not hold good tomorrow. So I think that change in the thinking also helps you in trying to leverage on technology to your advantage. I mean, I don't think I would have operated a WebEx or a Zoom 1 year back with any confidence what I'm doing today, because you're forced to make some changes, I think, which is good for us. I think ultimately it means change is constant, change is dynamic. You need to change your mindset, which can keep thinking all the time. You need to be in those mode rather than thinking that's the end of it.
Now, I was speaking to some people in the current generation, and the current generation is all about instant gratification. Whereas authenticity, it's a journey, it's a longer play. We were on a webinar with Nena some weeks ago, and she said, we could have done things differently in 3 months, but doing it the right way took us 2 years. How does one sometimes find the right balance in an organization when you are trying to get there and yet you want to do it the right way?
Nobody knows the answer, Ashu. Maybe God does. Nobody knows the answer, but I think the important thing is to keep having conversations, to keep hearing the views of people, and not, as I said, pretending that I know all the answers, and be willing to adjust, be willing to make mistakes, but get feedback. So a constant process of review and improvement, being willing to admit if a mistake is made, and not pretending that anybody knows the answer, or that one or two people know. So you have to be very inclusive. You have to keep trying out, and then hope that you don't make very bad decisions. I think that's the real truth. Nobody knows what is too fast, what is too slow. Who knows? Who knows? Nobody knows. Even with the hindsight of historical knowledge, you don't know. So I think it's always a process of, in the moment, what choices do I make, and what is the basis for making those choices? And I would say one should be more inclusive. One should listen to different points of view, and then finally you make a decision, but be willing to change if you think it's right. And nobody in the world has really any idea of what is the right pace or what is the right goal. Nobody does, and nobody will ever do, but we keep trying. That's my view. I know it's very non-fashionable to say that, but that's what I believe in. I used to be ashamed and embarrassed to say it. Now I don't feel ashamed and embarrassed. That's the only difference.
So you are slowly becoming very authentic leader, Rajeev. So it means now you started realizing, which you didn't realize, you were pretending to be authentic, but you are not really honest. I think, it's very well said. I'm just building on this, Rajiv. I wish we have the answer. It's a $1 million question. I think it's an evolving process. There's no end answer to it. I think one of the things I just want to build on it to see, when you say reward and recognition, youngsters, one of the things we said is meritocracy. I'm giving a very concrete example. It's very important to reinforce what Rajiv also has said. I think, when it comes to meritocracy, Ashu, I faced a situation where a guy who's treated is the star, and he was rewarded very well, but he came and put in his papers. I have to believe even today was very authentic. He said one of the reasons, you'll be surprised, one of the reasons which proved to be genuine was that, so you talk about authenticity, but you don't differentiate between a high performer and a mediocre. So this is not meritocracy. Basically he's saying, if I got A plus, he got A. I don't see that's a differentiation. This is not walk the talk. This is the feedback given by a youngster. We believed it. There is no other reason, but this is strongly believed. So I think in these matters, when you talk about any awards, as I said, it is not the big picture of what you talk about, GSK spirit, everyone committed, everyone, or what Rajiv has alluded as far as the Mahindra is concerned. Small things make a lot of difference. You want to be an authentic, do not only focus on the big picture, but focus on some of the key elements which touch the chords of the people, and they may take decisions based on that. So you need to be aware of the sensitivities and feelings of others while you are driving your purpose, why we are in this business, how we want to do it. But it's ultimately how you execute it is important.
I think, yeah, it's that how you execute becomes most critical, because that is when you are really getting into the feelings of another human
being.
And rather than getting carried away by just the task, it is the how which becomes the relevant part. We are barely few minutes away from the end of the session. I will just ask if there are any any more questions. I'll wait Pritha or Jasnoor, any questions? Otherwise, I'll move to the next one. Okay, so my last question for today really is, what has been your experience with this journey of authenticity?
Who should go first?
Okay, Rajiv, since you are on my screen first, you can go first.
Rajiv, okay. So I think this desire to be authentic, no matter which way you define it, inner space, sensitivity towards others, or wanting to live up to my promise, has been there for me since the time I can remember. There were periods in my life when I was embarrassed and ashamed about it, because somehow I was given the impression that to be successful in life, you have to be ruthless, you cannot be so sensitive, you must do things that are tough. There was a time when tough decisions was the big thing, and I was not getting. What has changed for me is that over the period of my life, I have realized that I should not be ashamed to be myself. That if this is what I feel inside, I will live with that, and I will be able to achieve my primary task and my purpose by being true to myself. And therefore now I am no longer embarrassed or ashamed to talk about the importance of authenticity or trust, or these so-called, what used to be called fuzzy-wuzzy words in hardcore business decision making. So I think that's the difference. I have realized that they are not two separate words. Business and is not a word that is devoid of emotion, devoid of spirit. No, it's a manifestation of these things in a slightly different context. So that is the big change that has come. My seeing the applicability of the same principles in all aspects of life, seeing the interconnectedness of things, and knowing that there is no one right answer. I used to think otherwise, oh my God, this guy is so sure of himself. I wish one day I could be as sure. And then the more I got into it, I realized that the people who were appearing to be very sure were the least sure. They were the people who had to put on this big act to cover up some other deep-seated insecurity. So that's the change that has occurred in my journey.
Okay. For me, it's a roller coaster journey, Ashu, to be honest with you. Still long way to go. I think I learned from the values of my family, especially my father. I think Rajiv used a word ruthlessness and toughness. I think one of the things when I was a young plant HR executive, I used to say that you have to bring discipline, and I used to take a very tough calls in terms of people who have been habitually absenting, following the due process. I never breached any process. But I used to see later the outcomes is that families used, because small town, families used to come and beg me, please take him back. It was really shaken me. I think, what I learned at that time, my father, who happened to be there in the same town, he used to give death sentences or life imprisonments. But next, we used to have a dinner. Next day, I used to see only in the paper. He never used to talk to me. So I asked him, how did you do this? How he said, one thing he said, rigor of discipline should not be mistaken as ruthlessness. I think, but the way you do it, you can be much more pleasant, give the soft touch. What I call is the art of tough love, which I later learned in GSK. Tough on issues, but soft on people. Otherwise, when we gone through so many mergers and acquisitions, which involves ultimately impacting people, it's very difficult. However, you tend to be genuine. I would not use the word authentic. You may not say, people may not perceive as a walk the talk, because this is where the challenge comes. The litmus test in this to test is your leadership or the culture of the organization. Despite all this, when you go to an employment engagement survey by an outsider, still you are rated one of the best employers, which shows that when you are genuine and honest in what you say and what you believe and what you do it, then you can say. So personally, for me, journey is the what I learned is the art of tough love. Tough on issues, but you can be at the same time soft on people the way you do it. So I want to leave with a provocative message, Ashu. I think this can be addressed in next in one of your sins. You can be honest, but in terms of authenticity, I'm just leaving this. This is not my view. You cannot be having you need to have a filtered honesty, in the sense the way you communicate it is very important. That is maybe authenticity teach you to do with a soft touch. Tough, the issue is tough, but you can address it is much more softly.
No, so compassion becomes really the key word as we are heading that compassionate to self, compassionate to the others. Compassion becomes the really the attribute that plays out at all levels, because that is what brings out our true self and helps another bring out their true self. So I cannot thank you enough for this very, not just candid, but I think vulnerable and heartfelt conversation. Straight from the heart, you both have spoken and really made Saturday morning worth it in a very big way. Sharing your experiences, sharing your wisdom, and sharing that vulnerability of it's okay not to know, and it's okay to be tough, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay, everything is okay in the moment. It's all contextual. It's doing your best at that moment in time and living with it. And I think that's what makes this journey very beautiful for all of us. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Ashu.
Any
Thank you.
last words from either of you?
I think if I can be permitted, I'll just quote one thing which I find very close to my heart. This is a quote from Steve Jobs. Your time is limited, so don't waste it in living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinion drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. I think this was a Steve Jobs quote. I thought is very relevant.
Yeah, says it all. Thank you.
Yes, yes, I think it says it all. I think it's to say anything more would be redundant.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
both of you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank
Hari.
you. Thank you.
And thank you to all the participants from being here, and
Thanks.
thank you to USB as well.